Hi there, thanks for tuning in. In today's video, I'm going to talk a little bit about the technical stuff. Don't worry, I'm not going to stand here and say we all need to become technical geniuses. I'm not very technical myself. I tend to struggle with some of the more complex bits of technology. However, it really does help to know what you're doing when you're taking pictures. Because the key to good pictures is good exposure. We need the details we want in our images to be recorded on the camera sensor. If we overexpose, the image will be washed out, whereas if we underexpose, it will be too dark. We can leave it on automatic and cameras now will do an incredible job, but they'll always take the middle of the road exposure. And the perfect exposure is not always this middle of the road exposure. Instead, it's where the balance of ISO, aperture and shutter speed is just right for the effects we have in mind. How we do that is something we can experiment with, and the different choices we make can result in very different images. So there are three elements which make up our exposure: aperture, shutter speed and ISO. Over the next few videos I'm going to look at these one at a time. If you're new to the technical stuff, I'm hoping it will explain the concepts. If you've been a photographer for many years, well, it's never a bad thing to remind ourselves of the basics. So aperture is the size of the adjustable hole in your camera lens that lets the light in and onto the sensor. The shutter speed is the time the shutter is open, allowing that light to hit the sensor. And ISO is the sensitivity of the camera sensor. So we're going to look first at shutter speed. When you take a picture, the shutter opens, letting in light. The amount of time it remains open is your shutter speed, and that can vary from a fraction of a second to a second or even longer. So have you ever found your pictures to be blurry if the subject's moving fast? This is usually because the shutter speed is too slow for the subject you're photographing. The subject has moved while the shutter is open. If you're indoors in the dark and your pictures are blurred even though the subject is static, this is because the shutter speed is so slow that you can't hold your camera still enough while the shutter's open. You get the camera shake from the tiny movements of your body as you breathe. Now we can avoid both these things once we start to take control. So slow shutter speed will blur movement because the shutter is open for longer. There's more opportunity for your subject to move. And we can use this creatively. Although if you are going to do that, remember you need to stand very, very still, or even better, use a tripod or balance your camera on something steady. And then you can take pictures with intentional movement in them, like this one. A fast shutter speed will freeze movement, and that's perfect for sort of action shots of the kids running around and jumping. I tend to keep my shutter speed above a 250th of a second most of the time when I'm photographing children, unless I'm actively trying to use movement creatively. So practice altering your shutter speed to see how it affects your images. If you're currently using your camera on fully automatic mode, then perhaps set it to shutter priority, which is TV on Canon cameras, or onto the sports mode. Then you can alter your shutter speed and the camera will take care of aperture and ISO. That means you can get to grips with this sort of shutter speed without worrying about the other settings. Have a play this week and feel free to DM me if you have any questions. I'm always happy to help. I'm really looking forward to seeing your images. Please also do give me any feedback, let me know what you think. And I hope to see you all soon for the next video where I'll be talking about aperture.